Hey guys, thanks for joining me on this neck shim video. You've probably decided that your neck needs to be shimmed because there's no way to lower the saddle or the bridge. And the reason you might want to make your own is because the neck pocket is not the standard Stratocaster shape. Like, you can buy these off the shelf in different degrees of angles. You can buy them blanked too, where there's no holes drilled in it. But the one I made for this guitar, you can see the hole pattern is completely different than a Stratocaster standard style. And you know, being in the woodworking industry for so long, I realized the value of a shim maple material is only $3 a board foot, and this represents about 1 nano millionth of a board foot right there. So they're $10 each, these shims, but decide for yourself whether you want to make one after you see all the tools that it takes to make one. I use this thin mylar material to make a template first, then I trace it onto the material. The raw material might look something like this. It's just a piece of maple. These Japanese guitars, man, from the 70s, you never know what the neck pocket's going to look like. Look how crooked they got the joint here, the neck joint, and the screws, the bolts. This one has quite a drastic shim. With the arch top guitar, sometimes it'll sink in a little bit. You really need to have some good height on an arch top saddle. It needs to be 7/8 of an inch off the top to get a good feel to the arch top guitar. There were not just Epiphones that were made in the 70s in Japan. There's Taisco, Lyle, Kawai, Harmony, Conrad. This one's a Conrad. Silvertone, maybe. There's a bunch more. But the tooling I use, besides the mylar and the material, I use belt sander. I use a band saw. I use a block plane and a special little jig that I made to hold the shim in place while I plane it. Yeah, so quite a bit of tools. I use a Forstner bit to make sure that I didn't split the shim while I was drilling the holes, because it's paper thin on this end, and if you're not careful, you'll just split it right in half after you've done all this work. Another thing you can do is sandwich it between two bigger pieces of wood and drill a hole through that piece of wood into this hole here, but it's going to be hard to figure out where to line up the hole if you're drilling through another piece of wood. So Forstner bit is good to use. And what I found out with this one, actually, this one didn't need a shim after I went through the whole process, but I figured I'd put the video on anyways so someone can learn how to make their own. This is what I recommend, though, before you decide what type of shim you're going to need, how thick it's going to be, and all that, is set the relief on the neck. You know, if it has, figure out if it has too much up bow or if it has a back bow, and get it straightened out where it's going to be about, you know, where it's going to be at the end of this, with the correct string gauge and everything. And then take the neck off, inspect the bolts, make sure they're not getting caught up in the body somewhere, make sure that the holes in the neck aren't stripped out, might need to fill those in, re-drill them, make sure each bolt is threading into the wood real nice. And I used wax. You know, sometimes if the bolt feels a little tight, you can use like a beeswax. I've had this beeswax for a while. It's great stuff. Paraffin wax is a little flaky, and you might use carnauba wax, I don't know, but this beeswax, man, highly recommend it for screws going into wood. Back in my wood shop days, I remember using bar soap. We used to use soap. So it turns out on this guitar there was something holding the bolt from keeping this neck in the pocket tight. There was a bunch of sawdust in the body, and it just wasn't making a good connection. So I was able to get this one setting in just right by re-drilling the holes through the body and waxing the bolts and cleaning everything off. Man, there was a ton of sawdust inside this one. So take it apart, put it back together, double check it all first before you start making a shim, because you might not need one. The neck could just be, you know, sitting in there funny from 40 years of, you know, string tension. So Thank you for subscribing. Thanks for joining me. And good luck. Well, it's an Epiphone 6832 6-string from Japan. This one, it has that celluloid inlay, which is kind of mother of pearl looking cool stuff. Also has a really cool looking headstock. Seems to be all original. 0 fret. I love the 0 fret. But the action's pretty high. I measured it at about, I think it was 8/64, both sides. Treble and bass, real high. So it has a bolt-on neck, so I can make a neck shim. But first I want to take a look at this corrosion that's happening on the strings. The green corrosion. Okay, so didn't need to back out the screws completely all the way, but I did go to this heavy duty Phillips head and a drill just to make things move along quicker. The neck I had to kind of jimmy it out of there. It was kind of pinching a bit. It's never been shimmed. So how does the shim work? It kind of works. This is thin mylar material. I'm going to make a template. Okay, so StewMac sells the 1 degree shim. They also sell it in 1/2 degree and in a 1/4 degree, 0.25 degrees. Now, let's just look at the 1 degree. And go down to the belt sander. Use this template. This mylar stuff makes things move along so much quicker. I'm going to cut it. Make sure it fits. Perfect fit already. Then I'm going to jot down where my screw holes go. And this is my template for working on the bandsaw. Great thing, I can see right through it. Okay, here's my piece of maple, and I'm going to go a little oversized. I'm going to fire this baby on up here. Take a little look at that fixture I made out of some 1x4 pine. It's just a little cut off piece screwed into the end of another piece, and that holds it steady up against the bench, so when you run your planer across that shim, it won't go flying across the room. We'll take some double-sided tape, stick it onto the blue tape. We'll put some blue tape on the shim, and maybe a little super glue, stick them together. And to get this tape to stick, or this wood, something to stick to it, I'll take a little acetone, clean off any oils that might be on the wood. I'll also take a little super glue on the tape. few spots. Also take a little tape onto the wood. So that the super glue sticks to the tape and not the actual wood. I'll hold that in place with a couple spring clamps for a minute. Let that set up, then I can start using my plane. Alright, now we're planing. Okay, and that's really all it takes as far as the planer work goes. Now we've got a taper going. Got a taper working on that. I could take it over to the belt sander for a minute, smooth things over. Now I gotta get this sucker unstuck. This is how I usually get it unstuck. Some of these knives, before I go too much further, I'm going to get this unstuck gently. It's paper thin on this end. It's a little hard for me to do with my left hand, but just go slow and it'll come off in a sec. Just a few drops of super glue and a little tape. Yeah, I wanted to get underneath that tape, but now I can take my template give them holes, and I have a radius on this corner and a radius on this corner. This is the treble side, and this is the bass side. Got it labeled bass and treble, just in case they're taking the neck off someday and it falls out. They'll know that the screw holes line up a certain way. Just like yay. Little fret polishing. Had to recrown the first 5. They're getting a little flat. I got 400,
of 600. I'll do 600, 800, 1,000, and 2,000. And then I'll hit them with steel wool one more time. I did the upper ones already with steel wool. Got the 0 fret too. I don't know what I should do with the 0 fret. It might be, maybe I'll just try to recrown one side of it. It's right up there, right up against that nut. Try some 400 grit first on this side. And 600. Looks like I got the front side nice anyways. There's some 800. Better. Guitar progress, not guitar perfection. I hear people talking about perfection a lot. Maybe someday I'll understand what they're doing, but I'm just glad I don't have perfect pitch. I don't really even hear when something's out of tune that good until I hear it back on a recording. I get caught up in the moment. I'll oil this board. She's looking a little dry. Don't want too much of it to seep down in the cracks between these celluloid inlays in the rosewood, so that's why I place it in between. Very nice. Got the peg head cleaned up nice. And a little oil on the bridge too. And when stringing the guitar up, I like to look inside to make sure that all the ball ends of the strings are tightly up against the bridge plate. And on this guitar I can see that the bridge plate is spruce, which is a bad idea, I think. Should be hardwood. Well, what can you do? See that? That's a spruce bridge plate. Well, this is the new StuMac light that changes colors. So you can have a pale white, warm white, or both. Very nice. I also noticed that StuMac sells acrylic mirrored material, which I already had. I use it on pickguards once in a while. It's a great thing to have while working inside a guitar. And that's going to conclude this video. Farewell to the old Japanese Epiphone.